This is the 10th of 17 one-hour online sessions, which have been running pretty well steady over the last 2 months. We will continue to run 2 per week, each session running twice per day. The sessions in this series are in the uncertainty phase, and they cover specific topics that matter to your businesses. They target 3 main focus areas: safety, which of course today's presentation falls in that umbrella, leadership, as well as operational efficiency. So check out our website at the end of this session to see which future sessions can help you in your business. There really is something for everyone. So I'd like to really quickly give a shout out to our session partners, FCC, WTC, and People Corporation. The online learning program has 3 separate series. So as we were talking about, this is obviously the uncertainty piece, and we have 2 more to follow, the recovery series and our growth series. So at the end of this, you will have several takeaways that will be sent to you after the session today via email. They include a feedback survey, the presentation, and of course any links, which there are quite a few in the presentation that I'm going to offer for you shortly. As this session is being recorded, it also too will be made available to all of you guys, and the link of it will be included in the email that you get after the session. So let's pretty well jump in here. So again, I'm Christina, and really happy to be here with you today. I'm new to the CME family. I joined the organization back in January. And at that time sort of brought with me about 20 years of occupational health and safety experience. So I've worked at this point in my career pretty well with, I think, all industry sectors in some way, shape, or form, but most recently, before joining CME, with the healthcare field. I'm really passionate about occupational health and safety. I fundamentally believe in every worker's right to a safe and healthy work environment, and most importantly, to return home to your loved ones at the end of your workday, healthy and well. So delighted to be with you today to walk you through a bit of a mammoth topic for sure. And talking about sustaining a safety culture. And then, of course, not only are we talking about sustaining safety culture, but we're also getting into a little bit about the transparent communication piece, as well as I know a lot of people, mental health has really been on, I think, the top 3 questions, issues, things that people are really reaching out for. And I think that's only going to continue as we move through this pandemic and the stages of it in our provinces. So here's our agenda for you. And I have to say the 3 of these, like I said, bit of a mammoth undertaking to get to talk about safety culture within 40 minutes and sustaining safety culture, and also tying in around transparent communications. And if any of you were able to attend, I think last week, a presentation from one of my colleagues here in Newfoundland and Labrador, Sharon, presented a webinar on crisis communications. So we'll sort of reinforce some of those topics and those learnings, but also tie that into safety culture. And then the whole piece around, like we said, anxiety and stress and mental health, sort of all under that umbrella of psychological health and safety during this pandemic. And I think really, before we sort of begin, I think if we were to pull a common thread through the 3 of these topics, safety culture, communications, and mental health, I think that the word that kept coming back to me time and time again was really a discussion around trust. So we will sort of weave that into the presentation as we move forward. Okay, so let's jump into to the content itself. And again, you will all have these slides sent out to you at the end of the session. So if you want to make notes, by all means, go right ahead. but you will have all of this by the time the presentation is over. Okay, so let's just talk about safety culture. In sort of putting this presentation and slide deck together, there are a lot of variations of this definition and what defines a safety culture. But I think these pieces really kept coming up time and time again. It's the beliefs, experiences, attitudes, perceptions, and passions that an entire organization shares in relation to safety. So of course, culture, as we have on the slide here, is manifested in your daily habits, patterns of behavior, traditions, and rituals that reflect your common set of values and provide a means, of course, of passing those values down to the next generation. And that's not just for safety culture, that's culture in general. So I've seen it described a number of times that safety culture would be like trying to describe beauty. It's a difficult term. We know it if we see it, but a little more challenging to try and define. So I think this gets at the core of it. But for me, I know when I've had conversations around safety culture over the past 15 or 20 years, I keep coming back to, for me, safety culture is what happens when nobody's watching. And it's holistic. It's not just something that we look at work. Safety culture is really getting at who we are as a workforce, who we are as an organization, who we are as individuals. It's not just at 4 o'clock when we punch out, or 5 o'clock when we punch out, that we shut this off. When we really look at building a culture of safety within our organization, we believe it, we live it. So safety becomes less about something we do, and it's really just who we are. So I know I've been in organizations, and maybe you can reflect the same, but I've been in organizations where you're going into the warehouse and there's big signs on the wall inside the warehouse that say, caution, personal protective equipment required beyond this point, and there's likely a list of boots and hard hats and whatever else is required. And then you step into that warehouse and you walk around, and really quickly you can see the culture. It's not tangible necessarily, but it's your observations of, do they believe it? And when you can walk in that warehouse and see, the steel toe boots and the hard hats and the glasses, and things are put away, the aisleways are clear, you really can see culture living in that environment. And I've also been in the opposite, where you walk into that environment, and although those rules are there, and people believe them because they're on the wall, but when you walk through, it really doesn't live there. Some people are in steel toe, some people are not. Glasses are on the workbench, are not always being worn. There's challenges with adherence. So those are the sort of tangibles around what do you see when you get into a work environment. And of course, just like the icon here on the slide reflects, safety culture really truly is a journey. So, many of you who are on this call may be very far along in your safety culture journey. Some of you may be just beginning, but whether you're at the beginning and looking at, okay, what are the laws? So what's the minimum compliance? What are the things I have to do to keep people safe? That's a great place to start, because obviously you have to be compliant with law. But then as you evolve, you don't just follow the rules. You look at best practice. You look at industry standards. You look at the risk and say, we understand the rules say this, but for us, that's a little too much risk to accept as an organization. So we're going to exceed minimum standard. We're going to look at the worker and say, we feel we can do better. And then as you evolve, and workers don't just follow the rules to keep themselves safe, they start following the rules because they want to keep the workplace safe. So I take care of you, you take care of me. And those are sort of, when you really start to get there, then you're really starting to get to a place where culture, like I said, can get entrenched, and people really feel, if I can start throwing this word in, because it's going to come out a lot, the whole piece about trust. You know, I can trust that my employer is keeping me safe. I can trust that my colleagues are going to work in a way that keeps themselves and me safe while I work. And I trust myself to do the right things while I'm at work. So you're going to hear that word come up a fair bit as we go through the presentation. But again, remember that it's a journey, and we may be in very different places along that journey, but it's a really important one to move towards, because obviously the further entrenched our beliefs, attitudes, our policies and procedures are, obviously the less opportunity for hurt and harm, and the more opportunity that people are going to home safe to their families at the end of the day, which is what it's all about. So if we move along to the characteristics of a healthy safety culture within an organization, again, a lot has been written around this, because like I said, it's difficult to see it, but then in some ways it's not. So there are some, I think, fundamental characteristics. This list was taken from the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, and many similar pieces have been written. But I think it's really important that organizations need to be striving towards this. And we'll tie this as well into our pandemic and what the pandemic may be doing to our safety culture in our organizations. So of course, the first thing we would want to see is that safety is clearly recognized as a value within the organization. So it drives decisions that are made within the organization, people's actions, certainly leadership and our senior executives, and how they allocate resources within the organization. And of course, I don't think that the pandemic has changed, or it shouldn't change, our values, because our values are who we are as an organization. But there's no doubt that it has challenged us in other ways. But if we know what our values are as an organization, it certainly does make it easier to maintain that safety culture through a pandemic, because we know who we are and we know what we believe. So if you know that as an organization, getting there, whether it's maintaining 6 feet of distance or not, or putting up a barrier or not, if you're led by your values and your beliefs, that will take you to the right places. So also that accountability for safety is clear. So we all understand when we start to evolve a safety culture within an organization, workers, managers, supervisors, senior leadership, when we really start to get safety culture entrenched in our organization, the lines of authority are clear. Everybody kind of understands what their role is and that they have a role, so that workers realize their importance in maintaining the safety of the organization. Supervisors and managers also know what their role is, as well as senior leadership. And the big thing again is I own it. And whoever I am, as on the worker, on the manager, I know that I play an integral role. And that's really key in terms of being a characteristic for safety cultures within organizations. This next one is really important because it really does tie to this pandemic for sure. So another characteristic of healthy safety cultures is a learning organizations built around safety. So we understand that it's all about continuous improvement. There's always things to learn. There's always things to share, whether that's best practice because things are going well, or we've had some sort of an incident or something has happened in our organization. We learn from that as well, so that A, it doesn't happen again, and B, we make the workplace safer. And even more than that, within organizations, again, where they're maturing in terms of their safety culture, they don't just look at that internally. They then realize, okay, well, if I'm learning this and this is happening to me, then I have ABC company and this other company that do the same sort of work as me, and either within their industry associations or within competitors even, they share these lessons learned and best practices, because the idea is that we want everyone to be healthy and well. So obviously COVID and what it has done to our workplaces, I think we see examples of this showing up in workplaces all the time, because I know we're seeing it even within Newfoundland and Labrador. The employers within the manufacturing sector are very readily sharing what they're doing, how they're doing, challenges they're having, lessons they're learning, best practices, things that are working. And of course, that really is getting beyond compliance. That's looking at how are we better, but then how can we make others safer and healthier, not just ourselves. So the next one, of course, being safety being integrated into all the activities in the organization. So this thing about safety being more than just what we do, it's really who we are as an organization. That really is, that's mature. When you can get there, so people don't just wear safety glasses because I have to. My supervisor is standing over my left shoulder, and if I don't put them on, I'm going to get in trouble. They're wearing them because they understand the risk of injury to themselves. They understand the why. They get it. They get that I want to see my kids grow up. I want to see the cabin on the weekend. And so I don't just do it because I have to. I do it because I understand the why. And again, this is not stuff that's built over a week. So much like trust, when someone was to say, well, I need you to trust me. Um, you can say that all you like. Trust is really earned. So same with safety culture. You can't just say we're going to develop a safety culture and in 6 months we're going to be there. It takes time, and it has to be nurtured and has to be built. But a lot of it is built around that trust. So the leadership component being very important as well. So safety leadership processes exist in the organization. So leadership understands its role and how important that role is, and they act as a role model for others. But just understand that when we talk about leadership, we're not just talking about leadership at the worker or at the executive level. Leadership is something that is inherent at all levels within the organization. I have had the privilege of knowing many workers who were incredible leaders within their organizations, and we're valued for their opinion and their insight and their guidance within their peers. So when we say about obviously acting as role models, yes, we would obviously expect that for our senior leadership team, but really as we evolve into mature safety cultures, we're looking for that leadership from all levels, from our workers, supervisors, managers, vice presidents, CEOs, and so on. So these are just some characteristics of safety culture, and not an exhaustive list, but obviously something to consider. So this is a conversation, I guess, that's sort of come out of the conversations that we've had within our province, that we've had with our colleagues across the country. We're hearing, obviously, the pandemic really providing a number of challenges on many fronts for our employers, but it's also provided some interesting opportunities for our employers as well. Well, as it relates to safety culture, no different. COVID-19 really has provided some significant challenges, and whether as an organization you've actually had time to breathe and even sit down and think about this stuff, it's definitely provided challenges for safety culture. So when we talk about safety culture, obviously we're talking about those things that come intuitively to our workforce, the habits that we form every day. So workers arrive at work and they put on their PPE, or they have it on when they come. They go into the workplace one way. We begin our day with a toolbox talk. We want those norms to become entrenched. And not that, okay, well, we don't have time this morning, so we're not going to do that huddle. We'll do that tomorrow, but then tomorrow comes and there's another delay. No, we begin our day with a huddle or a toolbox talk. So obviously, there are norms that we had up until the second week of March, that we were working at, again, entrenching those values, entrenching that safety culture within an organization. And then this pandemic occurred. So for some, they have, closed their doors and they're operating as best they can, but with minimal work being done. Then others have continued to operate fully from day one, with all these challenges around how do we socially distance, how do we ensure good hand hygiene, how do we make sure that we're keeping people safe as they move throughout our facilities. Well, all of these things that otherwise were business as usual now are not. So COVID is really challenging our daily norms within the workplace. And of course, you hate to have momentum and then lose that momentum. So it's really a big question for employers. How do we maintain the habits, the good habits, when now we don't come into work the same way, we don't start our day the same way, we don't. So that's why, as much as you can, holding on to those really positive habits as much as you can is really important. But we acknowledge that obviously it's really difficult to do when now we can't all get in the lunchroom together and we can't all be in the training room together. So that's definitely a challenge. We just talked about the established norms and behaviors can be difficult to sustain, because there's so much change happening in our work environments every day. You could be going along fine and then you end up with a positive case. So then everything stops, contact tracing, cleaning and disinfecting. So now you've had a little bit of momentum and now things are back to people are potentially anxious, additionally stressed. There's further distraction in the workplace. So you're constantly kind of getting hit at with all these challenges to your norms and behaviors. So again, not easy to do and maintain safety culture in that environment. And then the other one that I wanted to mention, because I think it's really important, is all of these things that are, we would hope, intuitive for workers. So the wearing of gloves, or the having your safety glasses on, or holding a piece of equipment a certain way, or following the steps of a safe work practice. Now we're saying, okay, well, you and your coworker can't stand close together, or if you do, you have to do it this way. So we're revising safe work practices. People are incredibly stressed. There is acknowledged a lot of anxiety, uncertainty. So we have a lot of stressors from the workplace, from our home life, just societally at large. And all of those things are distracting to the task at hand. So how do we continue to get the work done safely when we have all these additional distractions for our staff? So normal is not normal anymore. How do we maintain safety culture when so much is changing in our world? So I think that then turns to the flip side of the argument, which is that it's really provided some opportunities, potential opportunities, to improve our safety cultures potentially. So we've heard many organizations so far, right from the very beginning, talk about how this pandemic has really been a bit of a reset for their business. So we've had some businesses discuss how, they had considered branching out, or they had considered doing things differently. And really, the pandemic has provided an opportunity to do that. And again, that provides a great opportunity to do the things that maybe the organization values even more, and set that reset for safety culture as well. Because obviously, if we're going to do our work a little differently, that gives us an opportunity to sort of reset our safety culture values as well. Uh, Again, opportunity. So the other thing that we're also hearing, and we're hearing this one a lot, is the innovation and ingenuity that workplaces, and sometimes it's just been by necessity. We have to keep people apart. So how are we going to do that? And okay, we're going to put up some barriers. And okay, we're going to look at our workflow. We're going to re-examine how people work. Okay, well, we're going to change the shifts a little bit, or we're going to get some people to work from home. And organizations are finding that that's helping. It's helping staff feel safe through the pandemic. It's also creating new processes, new ways of doing business. And again, that's not always a negative, because in the end, it may make you stronger. You just have to make sure, because again, this provides real opportunities for ingenuity and innovation for safety culture. You just have to be consciously aware that with all this change, um, you could lose traction if you're not aware of making sure that we're building the trust, that we're communicating, which we'll get to shortly, with our staff regularly about the changes that are happening. We're getting their input, because again, that builds trust. And again, the benefit is that over the long term, that actually may build safety culture. So the next one about building and enhancing trust. Um, there's a lot of fronts that this pandemic um, can really make an employee and make a group of employees feel incredibly valued through this experience. So realizing that we are in crisis, make no mistake, globally we're in crisis. Um, when we're in this level of crisis, there is again a lot of that anxiety and stress and uncertainty in our work life as well as in our personal life. But if as an employer we are communicating what we know, we're giving valid information, relevant information, we're controlling the message, we're dialoguing with our staff, we're looking for their input, we're getting their suggestions, they are feeling valued. They're The trust is going to come because they see everywhere they look that when I come to work, because work is important, it's important to my family because I earn a living, it's important for my wellness and mental health to go to work every day, but I do so without that burden of feeling like I don't know if I'm going to get sick, if I'm going to be exposed. My employer is doing all these things to keep me safe and well, and that builds trust, which is incredibly valuable in building safety culture. So I think a real opportunity there, if we're doing those things well with our staff. Um, so the other thing that this can provide as an opportunity is as we build these norms, sometimes the norms that informally happen may not always be in line with our values. So this sort of operational reset allows us to challenge maybe some of those more worrisome norms that maybe we were seeing in our organization. Well, we've always done it this way. Well, COVID is really providing us an opportunity of questioning, okay, we've always done it that way, but is that the best way that we can do this? Or is this the safest way that we can do this? And the pandemic is allowing us an opportunity to really examine and analyze and assess that as an organization. Crisis. Well, crisis, as we talked about already, is incredibly stressful, but there's nothing like a crisis to bring groups together, teams, organizations, businesses, families. when you're in crisis, the first thing you'll often do is look for those and reach out for people who are in it together. And so if leadership and if staff within an organization can really rally around how are we going to do this, and that ability to foster thought and creativity and ingenuity, there's a lot of positivity that can come out of problem solving, working together. We just kind of have that common goal, or we're working towards that greater good, that we all want to be safe and well. The stakes are even higher through this pandemic, because obviously the implications are not just for our workplaces, because if we have a positive case at work, this really potentially impacts our family. So the lines between work and home are really tight as we move through this pandemic. So crisis really does provide an opportunity to work together, have that common enemy to work to protect us against, and also sort of that greater good. And I think this last one, this sort of can-do attitude, again, we're seeing this one a lot through this pandemic. Organizations have been faced with tremendous obstacles, things to overcome. How are we going to do this? And I think organizations are just finding a way, but they're doing it in a way where teams are really digging in and looking at the work critically, that problem solving, but they're doing it together. People are really sort of empathizing to say, oh, we can do this. We can figure this out. And I think at the end, when you know that you're supported and you know that your opinion is valued and you're working together toward that common goal, I think at the end, again, you come out of this thing stronger than when you went into it potentially, which again, if done intentionally and with safety culture in mind, there is a potential to really move your culture along in exponential ways through this crisis. And again, we still have a long way to go with this crisis. This is not, we're months into it, but we all know potentially that second wave ahead of us in the fall. We still don't have a vaccine. So we have time to make these changes and to think about critically how we're going to do that as we move through. So tying now the safety culture piece and how important, we've already talked a little bit about communications, and again, like I said, we've had a couple of presentations already that tied specifically around communications or had communication components to them. It's so critically important through this pandemic, but also in terms of the evolution of a safety culture in an organization, that organizations really look at transparent communications with their staff. The trust and loyalty piece, again, so very important for an organization as a whole, but it's critical to safety cultures, because if I know that my boss is going to provide me with the information I need to know to get through my day safely, and they do that in a regular, it's something we do every day. We have weekly updates, and in a way that I can feel safe, then chances are I'm going to be able to feel free to bring forward concerns or questions. Whereas the opposite, if I don't feel that I can ask a question, or I don't feel valued, or I don't feel that trust within the organization, then chances are I'm not going to get as much of that two-way communication that I'm really looking for as an executive within the organization. Obviously, when we are transparent with our communications with our staff, information does tend to flow fairly well, hopefully. And it works both ways. So we improve our performance overall. Obviously, we improve our safety performance. But if our senior leadership team is transparent in their communications to us, and we're able to flow feedback back to them in terms of this is working, this is not working, we need to change this, and I feel comfortable in doing that. At the end of the day, our safety culture is going to be stronger. and we're going to be stronger as a team and an organization. So real opportunities here, I see definitely as we move through this pandemic. Obviously, again, this whole thing around employee engagement. If I'm, here are the words again, if I'm valued and I feel trust in the organization, people are more apt to be engaged in the work. They feel like I know what's going on. There's not someone talking about something in the lunchroom that I heard nothing about. We're all getting the message the same way, the same time. So obviously, I'm going to feel part of the organization. Again, when we're transparent with our communication, it's amazing when you have a conversation with someone, and especially if you're problem solving, and it just triggers somebody else to think outside the box, or and if you don't have those conversations, then you don't have that real ability to look at solutions openly and actively. And again, if I have that hesitation or even fear that if I bring up an idea, well, they're only just going to say that, we can't do that, or that's not going to work. If my opinion is valued and the communication is transparent and open, you're definitely more likely to get that real free flow of information, which can come up with some really creative and ingenious ways, again, like we're seeing through this pandemic, of solving problems. Also, obviously, if we are sharing information in a timely manner and we're doing it in a consistent way, then we're all getting the information in the same way at the same time. So that really does provide the opportunity for everyone in the organization to be aligned, because I'm not missing something, someone's hearing something that I didn't hear. It really does keep, like I said, the workplace open, and we all feel like, okay, we're on the same page because we're all hearing the information the same way. Again, this whole thing about building trust, so really important, and particularly, like I said, through this crisis. It's a very stressful time, but the more that we are transparent in our communication with our staff, the more likely, obviously, we're going to feel that value and trust. And that's going to strengthen the relationships between the management team and the workforce. And there's going to be a lot more engagement as we move forward. And obviously, at the end of the day, if we're transparent in our communications, there shouldn't be anybody doing the, how did you know that? Or where did you hear that? And that can be incredibly detrimental, both to safety cultures, to trust, to teams, to team building, and a million other things. So it's really important that we make sure. So that's where, for example, the working from home and the working from the office, if you do have teams that are split a little bit right now, it's so important that the messages we're sharing with our workplace team that are in the building every day, and the people who may be working from home, it's really important that we're transparent across our teams so that there aren't any surprises, or when someone comes back from the working remotely from home, that they're not learning things that I never got that. No one told me that. Because again, that helps to kind of work away at the trust issues, and it helps to make people a bit more like, why didn't they include me in that? So again, transparency is so critical as we move through. Okay, so the last piece here, and again, getting back at the trust thing, is coming back to our definition of safety culture. So we talked about that. Obviously, it's the beliefs, experiences, attitudes, perceptions, and passions that an entire organization shares in relation to safety. We can't have a conversation about keeping our staff physically safe and well without including psychologically safe and well. And again, through this pandemic, this has probably never been more true, that we make sure that we're looking at the employee. And again, that's just inherent in safety culture anyway, that we value the worker when we start to get into mature safety systems. We value the worker holistically. So we don't want you getting hurt off the job. We don't want you getting hurt on the job. We don't want you to be physically harmed, we don't want you to be psychologically harmed. So we are going to look at all facets of human behavior, including people's psychological health and safety. So obviously this one in and of itself would be a day, a week to talk about. But we all readily admit that the longer this pandemic rolls on, obviously the further levels of stress and anxiety and uncertainty that people feel. So it's very important that with those transparent communications with your staff, so whether that's daily huddles, that's a weekly review, that's a newsletter, that you are including in those communications, not just the importance of keeping distance, which is very important, hand hygiene, which is very important, but also that we're including whether it's resources that the organization has to support staff. But if we're going to talk about social distancing, we're also going to talk about stress and anxiety. So we've included below here, and again, you will all have this slide deck when the presentation is over. But we've included some of the key stakeholders throughout Canada around mental health. And they have, I have to say, a tremendous amount of resources available for workplaces around anxiety, stress, all kinds of mental illness. And again, reach out and provide an environment where people can feel comfortable. Again, when you feel trust, I can trust you to say, as my supervisor, that I'm really struggling. And if I don't feel that trust, then I may not have that conversation. So the more we have those important conversations in our workplace, obviously, the stronger our organization will be. And again, that helps to advance the safety culture of the organization. So a lot of information I know, and the federal government link here particularly has links within it to all the provincial jurisdictional mental health supports. So lots here in terms of employers, and included as well posters that you can put up in your workplace. There's additional lots of links in here around toolbox talks that you can use with your staff. But again, when we talk about sustaining a safety culture, we cannot have that conversation without talking about the importance of mental health as well. Okay, so that has brought us to the end of the presentation in terms of topics to cover. And I don't know, Leanne, if we have had any questions throughout the 40 minutes or so, but I'll toss it to you to see if we have anything out there.
Sure, we do. Thank you, Christina. Okay, so the first question is, what are some of the challenges or barriers for building organizational trust during this pandemic?
Yeah, that word's come up, and it's really important. But like I said earlier, trust is not something that you can just say, you have to trust me. So the biggest challenge is the everyday. It's the things that you do every day in your work environment to build the trust. So it's communications one-on-one, it's coaching, it's observations, it's feedback, it's listening, it's providing that example, it's getting to know your staff. And there's no doubt that COVID has certainly provided real challenges for our leadership, our supervisors, managers, and senior executive, because we can't always be in as close proximity to our staff to have those, I'll say, organic conversations that might have happened easier before the pandemic. But all of those things need to continue. But I think the biggest barrier is just people feeling safe in their work environment. And if we work at that every day, both through our actions and our communications, I think we can overcome a lot of those barriers. And in the end, like I said, I think you can actually come out stronger when it's all said and done.
All right, thank you. Great answer. Okay, next question. So what are some suggestions to ensure the safety culture is maintained during these times of uncertainty?
Much like the first question, it takes work. Just like you can't have trust, it's built. You don't get to just say, I have a safety culture and it's strong in our organization. Um, that's built, and it isn't built overnight, it's built over time. So, right now, these are really critical times that we can kind of make or break our safety cultures. Because if we're doing all the right things, I think out of this pandemic, organizations can be incredibly stronger. We're hearing stories daily from staff talking about how, I thought I worked for a really great company, but through this pandemic, that's been even, and you're hearing those examples where people really are feeling through this pandemic. If you're doing the right things, if you're valuing the worker, if you're communicating, if you're including them, if you're engaging them, if they're listening to their ideas, taking their suggestions, making them part of the process, protecting them as best you can, again, all those things at the end of the day are going because they would under normal circumstances anyway, but particularly in this crisis, they're going to really strengthen that culture when we come out of this on the other end.
Okay, great. So unless there's some more questions, I think we can wrap everything up. Thank you very much. So I'd like to thank Christina again, just for a great presentation. Thanks again to our session partners, so World Trade Center, Farm Credit Canada, and People Corporation. I'd like to thank everyone for joining today. And just a reminder, there'll be a short poll that will pop up on your screen in a few seconds. You'll also receive an email with the PowerPoint presentation, the video, and the certificate within 24 hours. The next session will be Lean Fundamentals, Tuesday, June 9th. We will have 2 sessions, 1 p.m. Eastern and 4 p.m. Eastern. Space is limited, so sign up on our CME website. So I'm going to launch the poll, and I'd like to thank everybody for joining today. Be safe and stay connected.